Well, hello, Wake Up New Zealand, Carol Sakey speaking. Well, first of all, I better say this is my opinion and my thoughts, and I take ownership for those. So everything I talk about in this video is from my thoughts. Now we have to wait to see if the thought police catch up on me. So here we go, and it's about these hate speech crime laws that are being talked about at the moment, which are very strict, and they talk about up to 3 years imprisonment and up to $50,000 in fines as to incitement to, and it's a very broad range that can be broadly adapted to almost anything that stops people from opposing the political narrative, from opposing socialism, Marxism, and communism. So these legislative changes are definitely going to happen in New Zealand hate speech laws to become a criminal offence, harsher penalties. Time and time again, the government refers to the Royal Commission's inquiry, and they are using that as to bring in these hate speech crimes. So it's the conclusion of that inquiry that they are using. The horrific terrorist attacks in Christchurch from one Australian citizen who Ardern refuses to send back to Australia to serve his sentence out, where taxpayers of New Zealand have to fork out of their pockets for his keep for the rest of his life. So, political police, who have they been targeting? Well, I just want to look at the term Ardern's been in and who they have targeted since the Christchurch terrorist attacks. And they've mostly been Christian conservative type people with conservative ideologies, Christian values and morals and beliefs. For example, we have a conservative thinking person who lives in Christchurch, who had his whole street where he lives shut off by armed police. Not because he had committed a criminal offence, because when they went in and violated his home space, what they said to him, they asked him, does he support Trump? And that's what he asked. So it became a criminal offence to actually support Trump. Because would you do a police raid on a property if there wasn't a criminal offence? And this is what it's amounting to. No, it's not a criminal offence, but they want that sort of thing to be a criminal offence. And that's what we're looking at in New Zealand. Your freedoms of expression, freedom of thought, and freedom of opinion. You are not allowed to own your own freedom of thought and opinion. The Royal Commissioner's inquiry stated that no other New Zealanders were involved with Tarrant. No right-minded people, no one politically was involved with this Australian. And that's what it says. So, New Zealand Police website. Now, the Royal Commission of Inquiry said that the police missed Tarrant. They missed everything that was happening there, what he was doing, what he thought about he was doing, how he'd travelled abroad and how he'd got a gun licence, etc. I've never seen the manifesto and I don't want to see it and I don't want to hear about it. But I look at this Royal Commission's report and it says how he got his firearm so easily. He was missed by police. He was missed by the secret services. And what was said was, the response to that was because the SIS and the police were looking the other way. But they didn't say why the police were looking the other way. But if you go to the New Zealand Police website and you look at designated terrorists 1373, you will find, if they don't take it off their website, the number of designated terrorists actually in New Zealand at the time. And I will just name a few. Right, this is only a few of them. The Mort related to ISIS of the Philippines, and they first originated as designated terrorists in New Zealand on the 21st of March 2018, and they renewed them as being terrorists again on the 18th of March 2021. Then we have the Islamic State, originally designated in New Zealand on the 4th of May 2015, and that was renewed and designated again in New Zealand on the 25th of May this year. There was Hamas on the list. Hamas military wing, first designated in New Zealand, October 2010. It was renewed 3 times since then, and it was last renewed as designated in New Zealand on the 26th of September 2019. So these were all in New Zealand, designated in New Zealand at the time of the terrorist attack in Christchurch. Also, Al-Shabaab, Islamic terrorists, designated in New Zealand October 2010 and renewed twice, and it was last renewed on the 30th of January 2019. The Islamic Resistance, originally designated in New Zealand the 11th of October 2010. It was renewed 3 times, and it was last renewed on the 30th of September 2019. And the last one I'm going to tell you about, because there's many more, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, originated in New Zealand, first designated in New Zealand the 11th of October 2010, and that was renewed twice, and the last time it was renewed was in September 2019. So when the terrorist attacks were happening by one lone Australian citizen, not a Kiwi, all these terrorists were designated on the police website in New Zealand. So you can find that, and as I say, that's if the police do not take that all down. So when it comes to Islamic terrorists, etc., the BBC reported Jeremy Hunt, British Foreign Minister, spoke about concerns as to near genocide of Christians globally. And when do you hear our government speak about this? You do not. You do not hear it. So you don't hear Ardern, her henchman, Andrew Little or Christopher Farr talking about that, because it's not part of the political narrative. It's not socialist, Marxist, communist narratives. They don't take anybody to task for demonizing Christianity. It's all about rewarding Ardern's narratives, stopping law-abiding citizens from speaking out publicly as to the real issues we have going on in New Zealand. And we have some very real ones around housing, by health, mental health, infrastructure, and it goes on and on and on. And they talk about bringing in harsh hate speech laws to shut down law-abiding citizens, where policing time will be spent more on thought police than actually catching the real crims. So police are paid by taxpayers' pockets. So what we're doing as taxpayers, law-abiding citizens of New Zealand who pay taxes, we're actually paying for the thought police to criminalise us through Ardern's government. It's like the gangs, they refuse to give up their firearms, the crims. They couldn't have those confiscated by the police, but the police were able to pick up on the easy targets, the farmers and the gun club owners. So UN News, yes, let's go on to the UN News. Head of International, this was the eve of International Day. UN Rights Chief urges governments to target hate speech crimes. What date was this? The 20th of March 2017. That was way before the Christchurch attacks in March 2019. So it says on the UN News, on the eve of the International Day for Elimination, reminded UN member countries globally about incitement to hate speech. Incitement, and that's what they're using now. So Ardern's ideology, and that of her political cronies in the cesspit of Wellington. Well, people, the socialist Marxist government, they're all a big lie. Socialism is the biggest lie of the 20th and 21st century. Ardern making utopian promises, criminalising freedom of thought and freedom of expression through using thought police as a weapon to destroy anyone who opposes her narratives, her political narratives. So socialism, it promises prosperity, equality, security, and it delivers poverty and misery and tyranny. Equality is only achieved when everyone is absolutely miserable, and that's what socialism is about. History tells you this. So socialism, it's that emotional sucking you in, the kindness, and then when it's got hold of you, then the stranglehold of you losing your freedoms and your securities. They promise you security. They don't tell you they're going to take away your freedoms and your security. And they don't tell you you're all going to be equally miserable. So socialism always shows signs of success in the first place until it gets a strong grip and then puts a stranglehold on the nation. And they use weapons of fear, control, tyranny to put a stranglehold on the population. So law-abiding citizens, Christians, conservatives, everyone, they're all promised this wonderful world of utopian world that's going to be so wonderful. This fairy tale picture, but in the real world, people, there's no fairy tales. So, yeah, Ardern, she does use this as seductive emotionalism to suck you in. And what we have is misinformation and propaganda and now hate speech. So this is what they call sustainability, which is highly unsustainable. Like collectivism, it's a flawed theory. You will keep on hearing the word collectivism from this government of ours. Collectivism is the opposite to individuality. Individuality that concentrates on individual rights of each person and concerns of each individual person. It's about property rights. Globalism is about collectivism. Individuality is about national nations that make their own laws, make their own migration laws that suit their country. It's not a one script for all. Globalism is a one script for all. It's supposed to fit all circumstances. And socialism doesn't work because it's not consistent with fundamental principles of human behavior. It ignores and incentives and human economic growth, the free market of profit, growth, incentives, and innovation. It ignores all of that, and it destroys property rights. So that repealing of the Resource Management Act that's happening is control of all public and private land. So farmers can't do what they like on their own land. They're severely threatened. They can't get bank loans because the banks know that what's happening to the farmers. They have no credibility anymore. So they're struggling, and these strict policies, regulations are killing them financially, economically, killing their livelihoods. And since Ardern has started this, the increase in suicides for farmers has gone up astronomically. And a lot of them are very depressed because they can't see any way out. The small farmers are really suffering. And remember, people, farmers have been the backbone of our country. And, this is about the food supply. And whoever controls the food controls the people. All our drinking water is to be centralised. And the farmers, their water is to be controlled. So whether they can water their cattle or not, all this is a big worry. Not being able to grow crops when they like, to graze cattle on slopes, even small slopes at certain times. Yeah, they're monitored and also audited. They are severely audited. They have to give these figures around how many emissions they're using, etc., the fertilizer they use, etc., etc. It's a huge worry for farmers. So traditional farming out the window, and it's more about rewarding those investors who want to plant forest trees, where I believe the government talks about 4,000 planted trees per hectare, and that's what they're looking at with subsidies. Rewards for overseas investors in land in New Zealand, farmland. So the Climate Action Plan, the plan to control all populations globally, how you behave, think, speak, drink, breathe, where you can live, where you can't live, what you can say, what you can think, etc., etc., etc. Your whole damn life being controlled. So enter. Going back to 2010, the UN Global Strategy, the decade of vaccines, 210 2010 to 2020, and it continues from 2020 to 2030, UN Agenda 2030. This can be found on the the UN website. Just enter the UN Global Strategy, the Decade of Vaccines, leave no one behind, and you will find it. And when they say leave no one behind, there is everyone, everywhere, and every age on this damn planet. And I kid you not. And if you don't believe me, go search it out on the UN website. And I believe, this is my thoughts, the next global crisis is going to be a global food crisis. They've already pre-planned the solutions to take more control of what you eat, your dietary plan, and how you behave. And that's all planned for you to be obedient or be punished. Don't speak hateful words about this. Bad thoughts, don't have bad thoughts, because that will come under hate speech law and you will be severely punished. This is a socialist, Marxist, communist narrative. So food, the farmers, the target, their lands mapped, monitored, audited, and banks won't give them loans. This is severely affecting farmers. So the time for farming is very stressful. My daughter came through Waimaku, Calcott today. She was telling me that farmers have big billboards up there and they are really feeling threatened, and they are given this message how hard it is for them. So to speak about the most cruelest, let's think about this. My thoughts on this. How can Ardern be kind when she can bring about the worst, cruelest, evilest abortion law in the world, where it's legal to kill, abort an unborn baby up to the time of birth? That in itself should tell you what sort of government we have. Just think about that. So, socialism, what does it do? It kills the human spirit. That's what it does. It destroys the family, traditions, Christian values, Christian beliefs, and Christian morals. Ardern, the temptress of socialism, luring New Zealanders into believing that she's given them a little bit of freedom and she's going to take all of it, and she's going to take your security by increasing hate speech, controlling food supplies, controlling where you live, controlling your life. So UN, it documented in 2017 hate speech as to xenophobia, Islamophobia. Strange, 2017. But who talks about the near genocide of Christians? No one. So I asked you, we have China, who's in bed, the CCP in bed with this government, Ardern's government, and it commits genocide, forced sterilizations, forced abortions, millions imprisoned, tortured, and what happens? The case against them is brought to the Hague, the International Criminal Court, just recently. And what was the conclusion? China is not a part of the International Court. But the UN Charter gives the UN Security Council authority to actually investigate crimes against humanity, genocides, tortures, etc. But what does the UN do? It rewards the CCP being president of the Security Council, giving it also veto rights to do as it likes. And so it goes on. So our government's in bed with the CCP who commits these horrific crimes, and yet it has the damn audacity to actually stop New Zealanders from having freedom of thought, to bring in hate crime laws, hate speech, take away their freedom of thought, freedom of opinion, freedom of speech, and yet they go to bed with these mass murderers who imprison millions of Chinese citizens. I asked yourself, think about that one, and think about the near genocide of Christians globally. Now, who is it who is committing the hate crimes? It sure isn't the law-abiding citizens of New Zealand. Thank you, people. Wake up. When faith knocks on your door, please open it. We cannot live on hope alone. We have to have all the faith we got, because when things get bad, even without thinking of it, time and time again, when things are bad, we go, oh God, just automatically. So many of us rely on our Christian values, our beliefs, our morals to bring up our family, to lean on when things get bad, to thank God for when things are good. So please share, and subscribe.